Dear friends, welcome to the channel The Eastern Front. This absolutely incredible story happened on July 13, 1941 near the town of Pesets in the Khmelnytsky region of Ukraine. Then the Germans were advancing rapidly. The constantly changing front line was so broken that sometimes it was unknown who you would run into at the next turn. One of such unexpected meetings glorified Dmitry Ovcharenko, a native of Luhansk region, who with the help of a simple axe and several grenades forced 50 Nazis to flee in panic, while chopping into cabbage 2 officers and 21 soldiers. Dmitry was a strong peasant. He was born in 1919 in the present Luhansk region, in the village of Ovcharenko. There was only an elementary school in the village, but Dmitry did not aspire to universities. His character was not the same. After finishing 5 grades, he went to his father's collective farm. Following the rule, where he was born, he came in handy here. Since his youth working in the field, Dima has grown up to be a strong, hardy guy, and then the father took the guy to his carpentry workshop. According to the stories of fellow villagers, the boy was in his place everywhere, and in the company, and at work, and in school, especially when it came to working with your hands. So he mastered the carpentry tool with ease. Moreover, the carpenter was familiar to Dima from childhood. He used to often help his father in small things. Now he was approached as an adult with a request to put up a bathhouse, repair the roofs in the house, and build the house itself. A good carpenter has always been valued at its weight in gold, especially at a time when socialist competition was going on everywhere and everything was full of slogans, 5-year plan, 3 years, and give. So Dmitry's future was practically predetermined. And a light, perky character allowed Dmitry to have a dizzying success with girls. So the guy wouldn't have stayed without his family. All that remained was to serve in the army and, upon returning, think about his family and his own home. In 1939, Ovcharenko was drafted into the ranks of the Red Army. By the time Hitler's troops attacked the Soviet Union, he had already been a well-trained fighter for 2 years and famously handled a machine gun. Dmitry was both lucky and unlucky at the same time. In the first days of the war, thousands died in the meat grinder that was going on in western Ukraine and Moldova. The Soviet army did not yet know how to resist, while the Wehrmacht soldiers already had extensive offensive experience, honed on the territories of European countries conquered before the attack of the Union. In one of such fierce battles near Moldavian Balti, Dmitry was also wounded, but it was easily wounded, nothing fatal, neither to send to the rear nor to leave in the ranks. So, a lacerated wound, sewed up, bandaged, twitch less, and it will heal. The guy was adapted to transport ammunition. They gave him a horse, a cart, showed a warehouse in the town of Pesets, and handed over the relevant papers. Dmitry was a responsible person. He did not let his comrades down. The warehouses had not yet been blown up or evacuated, so there was something to fight with. So on the July day of 1941, when there were battles for the city of Balti, Ovcharenko's cart once again left the city and rumbled along the dirt road broken by explosions. The ammunition was packed under a tarpaulin and was intended for the machine gun company where Dmitry served. There was only 4 to 5 kilometers to go to the location of the unit, but suddenly 2 trucks with German soldiers emerged from around the bend. One of the 3 escort officers approached Dmitry, knocked the rifle out of his hands, and ordered him to show what was in the cart. Dmitry obediently approached the cart and threw back the tarpaulin. But Ovcharenko was not going to give ammunition to the Germans. No one expected what happened next. The fighter snatched an axe lying there from under the tarpaulin and with one blow took off the officer's head. 3 grenades flew towards the car one after the other. Chaos ensued. 21 Germans were killed, the rest fled. Enraged, Ovcharenko chased after the second officer with an axe, caught up with him in the vegetable gardens and cut off his head in the same way as the first. Dmitry simply did not find the third officer. Panic is an interesting thing. From the surprise and unreality of what was happening and the confusion that had begun, not a single German soldier guessed to use his weapon against Ovcharenko. Maybe everything would have turned out differently, and we would never have found out about Dmitry Ovcharenko, but when screams and explosions suddenly rang out among the peaceful picture, The driver of the second truck simply hit the accelerator and retreated, taking with him about half of those present. The rest were less fortunate. Raging Ovcharenko crushed the wounded with an axe like cabbage. He had no mercy for the enemy, and no one talked about humanism then. Ovcharenko brought the ammunition safely and on time, and at the same time, as he was all covered in blood, he drove to the headquarters and handed over to the commanders all the documents, diagrams, and maps that he found from the soldiers and officers he killed. The headquarters did not believe the story of the fighter, especially since Dmitry was delayed with his return for a couple of hours, and everybody was already thinking about whether he had died and whether he had deserted. Both were not uncommon in the early days of the war, but Dmitry still showed up, and the headquarters decided that the fighter was just making excuses for being late and telling stories in an attempt to avoid punishment. But the bloody uniform, the papers brought, and the soldiers' medallions still forced the command of the unit to check Ovcharenko's words. Ovcharenko himself was taken into custody just in case. A mobile reconnaissance squad was equipped, which, upon returning, confirmed the words of the soldier. At the same time, they brought a legendary axe. Due to the hype around the documents brought and the general confusion of those days, the forgotten Ovcharenko spent 3 days in custody. They remembered about him and released him only after they realized that they would have to retreat. The maps helped a lot in the rapidly changing combat situation of that time. But Dmitry was not awarded for this feat at that time. The command remembered him in August of the same year, when Ovcharenko's name once again surfaced among many presented for awards. After the incident with the axe, some 2 weeks passed, and Ovcharenko was already in the ranks. In the battles for the height, Ovcharenko again proved himself as a hero, not allowing the Nazis to raise their heads from the ground. It was then that Lieutenant General Ryabyshev and a member of the military council Khmelnytsky signed the submission of the fighter to the well-deserved award, the title, Hero of the Soviet Union. Only on November 9, 1941, by decree of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR for exemplary performance of combat missions of the command at the front of the struggle against the Nazi invaders and the courage and heroism shown at the same time, Dmitry Romanovich Ovcharenko was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. In the future, Dmitry Ovcharenko fought like everyone else. He did not put his head under bullets, but he was not noticed in cowardice either. He was not very friendly with discipline, so he remained a simple soldier who liked to go AWOL, have a few drinks, and tell some military tales to the youth. The young replenishment at halts loved to listen to the story of his feat, which was accompanied each time by new details, richly flavored with a strong word. The fighter did not manage to live up to the great victory for only 3 months. In the battles for Hungary, Dmitry was seriously wounded and died in hospital on January 28, 1945. In his native village, the countryman is remembered and honored. Flowers always lie at his monument, and a street bears his name. To be honest, the story looks very fantastic and at first glance unlikely. I even decided to dive into this topic deeper and look for information whether it is fake or another propaganda. And I found interesting comments on one of the pages on the internet. My friend has a real carpenter's axe, not a modern factory product for office plankton and tourists, but forged by hand. When he took it with him outdoors to nature, the queue was lined up just to try to chop something. Perhaps with this it is possible to cut off the head, perfectly sharp, heavy, with a long grip handle and a wide blade. I imagine the picture: a forest, a cart, a man with a bloody axe, a sea of corpses. The man says, "There should be only one," and cuts off the head of the last German. When I served in the army, during the repair of the hangar, scaffolding began to collapse. So the grandfather, about 60 years old, jumped from them somewhere from the level of the 3rd floor. In the end, he didn't even scratch himself. So in a critical situation, you can expect everything from a person. Why not? If there was a case at 9 HT and the head of a senior officer falls under soldiers' feet, I won't say for myself exactly, but maybe I would have run away from such horror. Nice. And if it happens not just at night, but on Halloween, and a severed head is found under your blanket, he can die of fear here at all. It could happen, and I want to explain why. First of all, Kroats are also people. Well, they see one Red Army soldier, and there are how many of them? And the blitzkrieg was still in full swing then, so they were still not scared. Therefore, I am more than sure that most of the personnel after the rifle was taken away from the Soviet soldier's hand did not look at him once. Yes, and who served will confirm that 2 fragmentation grenades into the crowd, not expecting such a dirty trick of infantry, can not only lay down a couple of dozen or mortally wound. Well, now about the axe. I have my own house. One side of the plot overlooked an alley and was planted by my great-grandfather with acacia and some kind of poplar. So every year we had to cut down part of the green spaces. So literally, in 2 years of such cutting, I got the hang of a completely ordinary axe with one blow to cut down branches in any place I needed, and with a thickness up to the thickness of a man's wrist. And this despite the fact that I myself quite frail. Dear friends, that's all for today. It was Tim and the Eastern Front channel. I am really interested in your opinion about this case. How do you think it is possible and how? And as usual, I wish you peace and health. See you.